Here are instructions for the Plate Tectonics lab, lab number 12. And I'm going to alert you right now that even though I assigned all activities and the lab report all questions, you can actually skip activity 3, 3A, and 3B. And when we get to those pages, I'll show you why. So most importantly is this plate tectonic map. This is showing you where all the plates are, the names of the plates, and whether they have divergent, convergent, or transform boundaries along their margin. Now, many plates have different kinds of boundaries along their margins. For example, the Pacific plate, which is the largest plate, has these blue boundaries, which are convergent, where plates move together, as shown by these black arrows, along a large portion of it. But then it also has this red and green sort of combination boundary, which is divergent plate boundaries, with little offsets that are known as transform plate boundaries, along a large part of it as well. So each plate is indicated with a slightly different color here to help your eye see it better. This is an important figure that you're going to want to have available to you, or a different version of it, when you take your final exam. I don't expect you to memorize the plates, but I do want you to be able to look at a map. If, for example, if I say to you, what kind of plate boundary is along the northern edge of the Caribbean plate? You would find the Caribbean plate, which is this, and you'd say, oh, it's a big green one, which is a transform plate boundary. So that I was just showing you here on page 100, and the questions for the lab begin right underneath it for activity 1. And activity 1 refers to the map on the next page. It starts by saying, use an atlas or a world map for reference and draw the axis of the global oceanic ridge system on the map in figure 2. So this is figure 2, and the ridge system is this red and green system that's over here. You can kind of see it because there's a color contrast in the ocean here for shallow regions, and the ridges are relatively shallow compared to deeper parts of the ocean. So you could just kind of go along, like I've started to do here, along the shallow areas. So do your best to find and match where the ridges are in the oceans. Question 2 asks you to label the deep ocean trenches in that same figure using the names in this list. And they're all indicated by these orange lines. So for example, the Puerto Rico Trench is out here, and I've just put a number 1 there, or you can write Puerto Rico Trench, it's up to you. The Aleutian Trench is up here by the Aleutian Islands, so I put number 2, etc. So you want to be able to label all of those. The bottom of that page introduces you to the different kinds of plate boundaries. And the next page asks you a number of questions about each of them. Question 1 asks you to look at this first figure. Is this a convergent or divergent plate boundary? Hopefully you'll know by having read the book, by having read this little description here, and also by having watched the learning videos. And then there's a number of questions to answer. Question 2 asks about this image right here. And I will give you the answer to question 2B. It says, what is the name given to faults that facilitate plate movement along this kind of plate boundary? And these are strike slip faults. We haven't talked about faults and fault names yet, so I go ahead and give that one to you. Question 3 asks about this figure. So you're going to answer some questions, and then when you get to part B, it actually asks about these figures over here as well. So realize that this question 3 kind of straddles 2 different pages. Then we get to activity 3, which is divided into 3A and 3B. And this is the one that I'm telling you can skip. It's a good set of questions. They're trying to ask you to understand the fit of South America and Africa and how certain rocks match up. But I'm not crazy about the way they've worded the first few questions. And it asks you to cut some things off on tracing paper, and it's just kind of a hassle. There's a lot of other stuff going on in this lab that I'd rather you focus on, such as activity 4. So let's look at that more closely. Activity 4 is asking you to look at a trench, which is created by a subduction zone, a convergent plate boundary, and this is showing earthquake foci, or the locations where earthquakes initiate. Shallow are in green, intermediate depth are in yellow, and the deep earthquakes are in red. And so they're asking you at what depth do the deepest earthquakes occur, and depth is listed here, so I think you can answer that. Are these earthquake foci distributed in a random manner, or are they along a linear zone? Question 3 always seems to give students trouble. It says outline the zone of earthquakes. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what they're looking for. Something like that. They want you to draw an outline to show where the earthquakes are concentrated. And then you're going to go ahead and answer questions 4 and 5. The next set of activities have to do with the reversals of the Earth's ancient magnetic field as recorded in the seafloor crust. This is showing a magnetic reversal sequence from the present back to a little bit more than 4 million years in the past. And what they've done is they've color-coded it to indicate normal polarity, where the magnetic field points the same way it does today to the north, in color. So we have red, blue, green, this brown color, black, and orange, indicating normal polarity. And everywhere it's white, it's reverse polarity. So you're going to answer a number of questions here that ask you to interpret this. Then you're going to make a bunch of calculations based on the seafloor in the North Atlantic, the South Atlantic, and the Pacific Ocean. And what they've done is they've put the colors on the seafloor. Of course, they're not really there, but they're there to indicate that, for example, in the Pacific Ocean, this bit of seafloor was erupted during this time period, and that's why it's preserved a red color. It's the normal polarity. During this time period between the red and blue colors, it recorded this reverse polarity, that magma that cooled and crystallized at this time. The blue represents this time period, which was about 1 million years ago, etc. So the next set of questions has to do with these isochrons. The first question asks you to identify and mark the periods of normal polarity with letters A through F corresponding to that previous figure. So if I jump back, you can see that there's an A, B, C, D, etc. given to each of these normal polarity intervals, and that's what's been shown on the left half of the South Atlantic Ocean. So we're going to do that here in the North Atlantic. There's my A, B, C's, D's, E's, and F's, and you want to do it for all of the oceans. Then it says, using the South Atlantic as an example, label the beginning of the normal polarity period C that began 2 million years ago. We have the current ridge axis here, where brand new crust is forming today, and the beginning of the 2 million year interval over here. That's where the crust formed 2 million years ago, because that's when that normal polarity interval began. Then you're going to use this scale bar on the bottom to figure out how much this seafloor grew during that period of time. So I've measured my arrow here. I'm going to bring it down here, and it's about 26 kilometers. So I'm going to put 26 kilometers in here. Now, this is a little bit weird because they have the North Atlantic up top, but they have the South Atlantic listed up top in this list. So don't be confused by that. Then it asks you to go ahead and double that amount, because if we want to figure out the rate of seafloor spreading, we need to know this entire distance from this point in C to this point in C. So we double 26 and we get 52. We're then going to calculate the rate of spreading because we know the distance and we know the time, which was 2 million years. We have 52 kilometers of spreading, and we're going to turn that into centimeters because we want to make sure we have a number that's in centimeters per year. And they give you a little sample up here of how to do that. And the rate of spreading is going to be distance over time, which is 2.6 centimeters per year. And that is the rate at which the North Atlantic spread during the past 2 million years. And that's a pretty reasonable rate. It's about 1 inch per year. Now notice that for this example here in the South Atlantic, they are giving you a number of 72 kilometers because they've already measured it. And so that 72 essentially was up here, which means that half of that is 36. So they've already measured this and decided it was 36 on this scale. And then they've gone ahead and they've done that sample for you. I've done the North Atlantic, so all that's left for you to do now is the Pacific. And remember, the beginning of period C for the Pacific is way over here and over here. So it's going to be a much greater distance. The last part of this page asks you to look at figure 2, which was from the beginning of the lab. It's asking you to measure the distance between point A and point B in real life. So somehow you're going to have to figure out how to get this true distance. You can try to use this scale down here. It might not be very accurate, but you can do your best. And then you're going to come over to the top of the next page, and you're not going to calculate the rate. That's what we did up here. We had the distance and the time. This time, we're going to calculate the age of the seafloor because we know the distance, which you just measured. We're talking about the true distance here across the entire ocean basin. And the rate we calculated in this previous part in activity 6B. And that's going to give you the age or the time since the basin was closed, since the Atlantic Ocean basin was closed. And you're going to do this for the North Atlantic, and then you're going to repeat it from C to D for the South Atlantic. Finally, you're going to look at hotspots, and we're going to look in particular at Hawaii. The first question here in Activity 7 asks you for the maximum and minimum age of the island of Kauai. And the island of Kauai is over here, and as you can see, it ranges in its age from 3.8 to 5.6 million years. So that's what you're going to put in here. What is the approximate distance in kilometers from the hotspot to the center of Kauai? So the hotspot is currently under the large island of Hawaii. So you have to figure out this distance. Now sometimes students get confused because they see the centimeter thing here and they just measure it on the paper. That is not what I want you to do. I want you to use this scale to figure out how many kilometers it is from here to here. Then, once you get an answer, I want you to convert that to centimeters like you did in the previous problem. Once you've done that, you can figure out the maximum speed or velocity by taking distance over time. Okay, so that was a lot of calculations. Hopefully I helped you, but everything is just the speed equation. Remember, speed equals distance over time. The lab report is basically a bunch of summaries about things that you did throughout the lab, and then you're asked to try to sketch the 3 types of plate boundaries. Do your best. I know it's tricky to try to sketch in 3 dimensions, but just keep in mind that transform boundaries have things moving past each other horizontally, convergent boundaries have things moving towards each other, and divergent boundaries have things moving away from each other. And do your best to try to label each of these things in this figure.